Good afternoon, everyone. 4 days. We have 4 days until the president's sequester takes effect. If he and the Senate Democrats do not come up with a plan to replace these cuts with smart cuts and reforms. And yet it seems that the president is more interested in doing his campaign-style rallies rather than actually sitting down with the Democrat-controlled Senate and coming up with a plan. Tomorrow, the president is traveling to Newport News, Virginia, 180 miles from Washington, D.C., in order to hold another rally, instead of traveling a mile and a half up here to Capitol Hill and sitting down in Harry Reid's office and coming up with a plan to replace these cuts with smarter reforms, smarter approaches. The Republicans, over the last 10 months, the Republicans have been working. We have passed 2 bills to replace these cuts. And now we need the president to stop campaigning for higher taxes, come back here to Washington, D.C., and lead.
You know, the president proposed this sequester, yet he's far more interested in holding campaign rallies than he is in urging his Senate Democrats actually pass a plan. Listen, we know there are smarter ways to cut spending and to continue to grow our economy. That's why Republicans have acted twice, as Kathy said, to replace the sequester, what we would argue are smarter cuts. Listen, the president says we have to have another tax increase in order to avoid the sequester. Well, Mr. President, you got your tax increase. It's time to cut spending here in Washington. Instead of using our military men and women as campaign props, if the president was serious, he'd sit down with Harry Reid and begin to address our problems. The House has acted twice. We shouldn't have to act a third time before the Senate begins to do their work.
Good afternoon. We heard the president say last week that he was going to be, because of the sequestration, to let criminals loose on the street if he didn't get another tax hike. Today we're hearing discussions from the Secretary of Homeland Security that somehow we're going to have to sacrifice Homeland Security efforts in keeping our country safe if we don't get another tax hike. This is a false choice. And the president has been engaging in this rhetoric of a false choice for weeks now. As the speaker just indicated, we in the House have acted. There is a smarter and better way to go about trying to achieve the reductions in spending so we can get a control over the spending. And in the House, we even included measures that the president has proposed in his own budget. But yet the president won't support even his own measures unless there's a tax increase. So the president really ought to stop campaigning and come back to the table and work with us. We care about what happens to this economy and the people who sent us here. We have proffered alternatives and solutions. We don't adhere or agree with this false choice the president's putting forward. And as Kathy said, president's off campaigning in my state, Newport News, Virginia. Yes, we're very, very concerned about the impact on the Commonwealth, as we are on all states. And there's a way to effect the right changes and reforms so we can avoid that. And we must set aside this false choice the president is proffering.
As the other leaders have said, the president's only idea to solve a problem is to take more from the hardworking taxpayers. Let's put the sequester into perspective. It's $85 billion. We have a spending problem in Washington. We borrow more than $1 trillion. We roughly borrow $85 billion every 28 days. So what we are looking to do is cut less than what we borrow in 1 month. Not what we spend, but what we borrow. This is not time for a roadshow president. This is a time to look for someone who will lead and work with us, because we're willing to work with them to solve America's problem.
All right, so a couple questions.
On both sides of the Capitol, Democrats have offered $20-odd billion in agricultural spending cuts. Is that something you guys, the direct payments, is that something you guys might be interested in?
Certainly, I think it'd be an option and be some place to start.
Considering that no negotiations are going forward right now, is it your expectation that sequestration will actually take effect on Friday?
Listen, hope springs eternal. The President can sit down with Harry Reid tonight and work with Senate Democrats, who have the majority in the Senate, to move a bill. It's time for them to act. I've made this clear for months now, and yet we've seen nothing.
Do we have a sense of how many jobs will be lost as a result of the sequester?
I do not, but I can tell you this. If we don't solve the spending problem here in Washington, there will be tens of millions of jobs in the future that won't happen because of the debt load that's being laid on the backs of our kids and our grandkids. Listen, I came here to save the American dream for my kids and yours. This debt problem and the President's addiction to spending is threatening their